One of my funnest stories is Will from Damus.
Okay.
We just did to the Progressive Bitcoiner together, so it's like on top of my mind. Someone like gave him like they're like, oh, we're like gonna give you Nostr coin. It's like an affinity token, right? And then Will's just like, Will being Will is just like, no, like screw this shit. Like this is like a shit coin. I refuse it. And he started charting it going down. But if you look at the comments, everybody's like swearing at him in Mandarin. They're
Really?
like, yeah, because it's like all the groups, and you see all the influencer accounts that are like bringing. So it's like,
Oh, wow.
so you know, and it's not. I don't think it's like the worst kept. Like it's not even like a secret or something, but it's just like a lot of the activity on like ordinals, layer 2, runes, and stuff like that. I
What's
think
more
that comes
popular,
out there.
Bitcoin or Tron in China?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, Web3 and crypto are definitely real.
Well, Tron for Tether.
Tron for Tether. Tron for Tether is definitely really popular.
Yeah.
It's hard to say exactly because the thing is you don't have figures that are apples to apples.
Sure.
But in general, I would say that Tether on Tron seems to be incredibly popular and growing through a lot of OTC demand.
I think Tether on Tron is still the number one, right? Mechanism.
Yeah, because they
Yeah.
have it on Ether as well, but it's
Yeah.
not. But the gas fees are a little bit too high.
Like
and Tron
Omni, I think that there's
subsidizes.
been a lot of
Yeah,
work
yeah,
to try
yeah.
and bring it to like Lightning or something like that. But just
Yeah.
Tether in general, I think, is mostly operating on Tron still. Is that correct? Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
it's more or less. And, you
Yeah.
know, you can go to these OTC desks. So Hong Kong's probably an easier place to see this because Hong Kong's a little bit more open. Because, like, in China itself, like, I tried to interview, like, the meetup organizers and stuff like that. It's, like, hard to find people who are, like, really, really public about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But in Hong Kong, you have all the meetups. You know, you have Bitcoin Asia that just happened and all this other stuff. So you get, like, a lot more of the views of different people. Definitely a lot of, like, OTC desks that are, like, Web3, crypto-oriented, you know.
Yeah.
Like, and then of the people who are, like, Bitcoin oriented. I was just in a space this morning actually where people were talking about it. They kind of, you know how it's like there's like a political matrix almost. There's like Bitcoin only people, and there's like Bitcoin Ethereum leaners, and there's like Bitcoin Monero leaners, and there's like Bitcoin Tether leaners. I'm just like devise that right now.
Yeah, that's right.
But like, you know, definitely people in Asia are definitely like Bitcoin Ethereum people.
Yeah.
Like they're definitely like, why can't we just bring like everything in ETH onto Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Like, and the reason for that though is because like that generation, they're used to like Bitcoin is like transactions are banned. Like it's,
Yeah.
you know, like, and they can't do a lot of different financial services. So they're like, why can't we do this like outside the state? So anyways, like,
Is that the speed of the technology or like the ability to just open up newfangled like smart contracts or like Solana, Cardano,
Yeah.
or like Algorand? Is it the speed? Like what about Bitcoin is now something that is like not to be messed with?
yeah, I think, okay, so first of all, I'm like a Bitcoin Monero leaner, if anything. I wouldn't even say Monero. So these are not my views.
Monero's okay. It's super interesting. We had Cake Wallet here a couple weeks
I mean,
ago.
Seth just came, so I'm assuming there's at
Seth
least
for privacy was
yeah,
here
yeah,
with
yeah.
Cake Wallet, and look, there are some misconceptions about Monero. I still think that Bitcoin is king, but ring signatures have their place in time.
I think I'm Bitcoin only, but what I would say is that if I had like an orientation or a lean, it would be more towards like the Monero camp, if that makes sense. But the people who are like kind of on the Ether camp or on the L2 like covenants and all this kind of stuff, you know, there's room for discussion. I think it's like more like an expression of like, first of all, the return profile. You can't really make pure return on Bitcoin in the short term as much as you can in tokens. And unfortunately, for some of these people, I think it's gambling. But for some people, that is like that appeal, right? And then the second thing is kind of like there's a level of things that you can't do on Bitcoin with covenants, without covenants, that you can do on Ether potentially. Obviously, there's a lot of centralization risks, and like the ETH Foundation controls a lot of that. There's a lot of burn, and ETH is terrible for a number of different reasons. But the idea from, I think, some of the generations of Chinese Bitcoiners is like, hey, like, you know, if we're doing L2 companies or we're doing all this, it's like a way for me to raise venture to like build this stuff. So it's like more
Yeah.
kind of in that vein. And then also people are like, hey, if there's tokens being issued or if there's like BRC20 or like stuff like that, they think of it more like the short-term return, if that makes sense. So I've definitely seen that. But yeah, it's not, I think like I think like an easy way to get a pool of people is to lean more in that direction. So I'm also caught in like this debate on like covenants and like L2s and things like that. And an easy argument would be like if you start implementing some of these things like OPCAT, and stuff like that, that you can start doing like insurance, you can start doing like multi-site. And that is actually more relevant in the context of like a China, because there are people who want these services outside of the state completely.
Yeah.
Right. They don't want to put their money in the banking system in the first place. It's not a problem as much as, like, so for example, in the Western context, I think one of the problems about scaling right now that we're seeing is that people prefer, this is like, I hate to say it, like I run my own node, all this other stuff, right? But if you just look at the data, most people are preferred to sacrifice self-custody, unfortunately.
Yeah, for convenience.
For convenience, exactly.
Sure.
So, but in China, you can't.
It's a sad reality for human beings.
It's a sad reality for human beings. But in China,
true.
You can't do this.
Yeah.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
But what you need to do is to get like kind of that return profile, or you need to get kind of the utility. But what I will say one thing, which is that I've seen some people, once they get into the Bitcoin ecosystem, whether they're like doing like one thing or another, they start to get what I would call are like cypherpunk views. Like I was talking to someone and she's just like, look, I grew up in China. I was using WeChat Pay, Alipay for my whole life. But now I get it. Like on Bitcoin, it's like, it's non-KYC, it's independent. It's not associated with any banks. And this matters even more in the Chinese context. The banking system there is so tightly surveilled and some people save them there. But yeah.
Are there stories of somebody like crossing or like jaywalking and they don't get the loan or into school and they're just like, you know what, this sucks. I was just jaywalking.
I mean, like if do you want the I mean, Alicia might have some of these, but if you want some of the dystopian stories, I mean, you get people who post on like X or Twitter, and they got like 40 followers and they go to jail, straight to jail.
No, really?
Yeah, it's happened. Wall Street Journal reported on it. Clubhouse, we had these rooms, and we weren't even talking about. I mean, I kid, but we had some fun conversations. This one guy came in, claimed or not, he had a really fun time telling us about like local meth culture of like local officials and stuff like that.
Wow.
It went hard. It went hard. He was like, he was like, this is how like everything. Anyways, we can never corroborate that, but my point is there were people getting on these channels. They were talking about whatever.
Yeah.
People did called in. They get called in. It's called the chutzpah. So they did get called in to go see the cops for expression. So there's definitely those stories.